here we are once again, honoring history and culture through farm to school curriculum. Well, we will be exploring culturally relevant teaching practices that celebrate diversity and honor history and culture. Oh, wrong slide. So first, the Farm to School team at Georgia Organics received a Farm to School implementation grant this year from the USDA. And it is with that funding that we're able to put on this webinar today. Our agenda today, we're going to have some brief introductions. We will, Jenna will give us a definition of what culturally relevant teaching is, culturally responsive teaching. We will hear a history of the Parkside Elementary School garden from Suzanne Wielander. And Tasha Gomes of Food Corps Georgia will lead us through a model lesson that you can use to honor history and culture. We'll debrief that lesson and go over some resources available to you and wrap things up with Jenna Mobley. So very quickly, if you're not already familiar with Georgia Organics, we are a statewide nonprofit farmer services organization. We see Farm to School as a strategy to connect organic food from Georgia farms to Georgia families. And we aim to increase the number of organic farms in Georgia, to increase the number of kids participating in Farm to School programs across the state, and to increase the number of Georgians eating local and organic food. We are a member-supported organization, and if you are interested in supporting our work financially, you can check out our different types of membership at membership.georgiaorganics.org. And then just a quick refresher on what Farm to School is. It is basically just using locally grown foods that you either grew yourself or you got from a local farmer to both feed students as well as teach students. So it's interactive and fun nutrition and agriculture education that teaches students the life skills of growing and eating fresh food while supporting local farmers and making community connections. See, and one of the ways that we at Georgia Organics support Farm to School work in Georgia is through our annual October Farm to School Month campaign. And so yeah, every year we do a big statewide campaign to get kids across Georgia growing a certain vegetable, cooking it, tasting it, learning all about it. And we have been celebrating okra all months long. And we still have about 4 days left to celebrate okra. So I hope that y'all are all finding ways to enjoy okra this month. And that's not the right slide. Apologies. If you somehow haven't signed up yet, you still can. And by signing up, you are eligible to win prizes in our social media contest. And also you get access to our online resource toolkit. And we also just want to know where in the state you are and how many students you're reaching with your Farm to School work. And that is another good reason to sign up. So you can sign up at bit.ly/livinlavida-okra if you haven't already. Okay, now I'm very excited to turn this over to Jenna Mobley, who is a teacher, an excellent teacher trainer. Yeah, y'all are probably familiar with her, and she is going to take it from here. Thank you, Jenna.
Hello, y'all. Welcome. Thanks for having us, Kimberly. You can flip to the next slide here and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing we're going to do today is talk about what culturally responsive teaching is. After that, we'll model a lesson and let you experience what culturally responsive teaching is, and then we'll debrief it there at the end. But just to bring a lens to what exactly it is that we're looking for today, this is a working definition of what culturally responsive teaching is. So this type of teaching is teaching that honors those that came before us and honors everyone that's in front of us in our classrooms. It's a type of teaching that acknowledges and promotes each of our individual students' identities and also celebrates the diversity in our classroom. So when we're looking at this first part about promoting identity, this is all about recognizing that each of our students are unique, they're complex, they're layered, they are the intersection of multiple different identities. And that's true both inside the classroom when they are students in their roles as students. That's also true outside of the classroom and in their lives as siblings or on their soccer team, in their family, in their neighborhood also. And as a teacher, we have the opportunity to acknowledge who those students are in both of those contexts. While they're inside our classroom, we can do this by engaging them in student-centered instruction that is centered around, led by their unique interests and abilities. Not our assumptions about their interests and abilities, but by asking questions, by listening, and by reflecting back to them what's important to them in our classrooms. And of course, the way that we can bring their homes into our classroom to recognize that unique part of our students is connecting to the homes and acknowledging, validating, affirming, uplifting all of the family and community traditions and knowledge that exists within their homes outside of our schools. And when we talk about celebrating diversity, this doesn't just mean on special occasions. This is a daily practice, all day, every day in our teaching, how we can encourage students and model for students what it looks like to respectfully express curiosity about other people, about their history, about their lived experiences, and how, as a daily practice, we can exchange ideas and beliefs with people that are different than us in an open-minded way. So today, when we move through these lessons, these are the two main elements that we're hoping you can see. The way that we are giving the student-centered instruction that honors and celebrates the family and community knowledge and traditions, and how we celebrate diversity and that cross-cultural communication. Now, when we start today, we're actually just about to start by honoring the space that we are in today. We're here at Parkside Elementary School in their beautiful school garden. And we have Suzanne Wielander here that's going to share a little bit about the space that we're in and everyone that came before us so that Tasha and I can give gratitude to those folks before we talk about the future of this garden and what this type of teaching might look like here and in your gardens. So I'll turn it over to Suzanne.
Thank you so much, Jenna. Well, I'm so excited to welcome you all here today and to welcome Georgia Organics to this beautiful space that we have here at Parkside. And welcome to you to our Parkside Learning Garden. I'm going to share with you quickly the story of our garden, including the sources for grants that helped our garden grow. The garden was first started in 2006, which was not long after the school was built. And it was the school's media specialist and a parent volunteer who were motivated by the magic of connecting students with where food comes from that made it happen. Early support was provided to them by the Atlanta Community Food Bank, who donated seeds and plants, and Farmer D Organics, who donated soil, and other donations that they gathered from the community. Things like tools, gloves, watering cans, and storage sheds were all installed here at that time. So our garden was taking root. Teachers were bringing their students to the garden, and the community even organized to tend the garden over the summer. But as with any garden itself, our garden education program went through a little fallow period after the founding parents' youngest child graduated in 2009. At that time, volunteer enthusiasm waned, and the faculty sponsor sadly passed away. But during these dormant years, the beginnings of our school orchard were planted. The apple, the fig tree, peach, pear, mulberry trees, and pomegranate bushes were all donated by the Atlanta Local Food Initiative and planted by their volunteers. These days, that program is now run by Foodwell Alliance here in Atlanta. Our garden program was briefly awakened with an high energy group of 3 chef parents who were very motivated to do tastings with the students. And a grant from the Captain Planet Foundation that was secured by our PE coach gave the school all they needed to do these tastings, including mixing bowls and cutting boards, utensils, prep tools for the students, a Vitamix blender, and a cart they could use to transport the tasting kit from classroom to classroom. So it was 2013, later on, when a new mom, who's a real powerhouse and community organizer, was surprised when she was in her students' class, in her son's classroom volunteering, and one of the students ran into the classroom with an old overgrown carrot that he had somehow pulled from the school garden somewhere. She was surprised by that, and that got her motivated to come out and find out where this garden was on our school property. She says there was a space and a place that she found, and she found that the bones were in place, but it was overgrown. We had a fence, artwork, rain barrels that had been donated to us by the Chattahoochee Riverkeeper during the drought of 2007. So enthusiasm grew again at that point as the parent volunteers were again drawn to the garden program. And at that point, it became a formal committee of the PTA. A new chef parent ran tastings, a horticulturalist parent got involved, and landscapers helped to refurbish all the infrastructure. Another grant was secured from the Action for Healthy Kids, and that one was used to install a greenhouse here at the school. We are now partially transforming that greenhouse into a chicken coop thanks to another grant from the Whole Kids Foundation. That grant also paid for new raised beds and a resource center library for the teachers. During that same period, we also expanded the orchard again, thanks to another donation from the Food Well Alliance. So we now have pawpaws and persimmons to add to the other fruit trees that we have here. So we have the structure, the volunteers, and a successful recipe tasting program, but what we were really lacking was motivated teachers to make the connection between the garden and the students. So another grant from the Captain Planet Foundation addressed this gap. We brought in professional garden educators from the Wild Center, and we also held a training session for 7 other Parkside teachers to help them understand how to connect STEM curriculum to the garden space. Our school's Go team had also agreed at that point to start paying for the Wild Center educators as part of our school's annual budget. But unfortunately, these efforts to bring the garden into the curriculum did not take root. Every year, our annual contract took longer and longer to get renewed. And as a result, our education lessons weren't starting until the winter, until half the school year was already over. And in the meantime, the teachers rarely took the initiative to bring their students into the garden. In 2020, well, you all know what happened then. The pandemic hit and just shut it all down. The school was closed, our attendance fell, our school's budget fell as a result too, and the garden education budget was cut from the budget. Luckily, the Wild Center stepped in at that point and connected us with the Food Corps, and who's able to provide us now with a part-time professional garden educator for 2 years, starting this school year. This is our last twist. The pandemic and social equity demonstrations of 2020 also gave us pause and motivation we needed to pivot our garden program and get it back on track. So we were standing there in May 2020 with a check in hand. We had $3,000 from the Whole Kids Foundation, a new grant, another $500 from Constellation Energy. But those projects that won us the grant were installing an outdoor kitchen, and we were wondering if this was what the school community really wanted at that point. And so we took it upon ourselves to figure out, why were the teachers not using the garden? So we stopped and hit the pause button and asked the teachers at that point, late in the process really, what they wanted. And guess what? It wasn't what we thought. They did not want an outdoor kitchen. They didn't really want chickens at the school either. Overwhelmingly, what they really wanted was an inviting garden space, and one that was less muddy and easier for them to bring their students into. They also wanted an outdoor classroom where everybody could sit comfortably. So we learned not to ignore the experience of our educators and what they wanted. And all we really had to do was ask. So today we're focused on rebuilding this garden space to make it beautiful, functional, less muddy, and easy to use. The school district paid for some badly needed infrastructure to fix our drainage problem, and that happened over this summer. And now we're working with landscapers who are drawing up plans that we're going to share with the school community before we move forward. Thankfully, our funders don't care how we use the funds, only that they're used in the garden program. So in closing, the curriculum piece is that final piece that we'll be headed to next. And that's really the animating force of any successful garden education program. So we're excited to welcome Georgia Organics and Food Corps here today to share their experience with you. So with that, take it away, Tasha.
Hello, familiar friends. My name is Tasha Gomes. I'm the Associate Director for Food Court Georgia and happy to be here with you today. We are just sharing, as Suzanne just mentioned, we are here at Parkside. We have one member assigned here. We're supporting Parkside's garden education program through hands-on lessons, taste tests, cooking demos, and garden lessons, for students. While we're here, our goal is also to model these practices for teachers so that with our exit, the education that's happening outdoors is sustained by regular classroom teachers. Super excited to be here, proud to be a part of the Parkside family. And if you haven't seen it and you have a chance to come out and check out their space, it is beautiful. Our members here, we have a suite of food core lessons. And we're just going to talk through today an example of a project that you might do with your students to use your garden space as a culturally responsive learning space. How to make your garden culturally reflective. But before we begin, just want you thumbs up or use your reaction button if you can, just to share if you brought a pencil and paper with you today or a paper plate. If you got that message, good. I see some thumbs. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Great. So the first question that I want to ask you and for you to consider is this. Think about a time that you shared a special meal. Who was there? Who was with you? What made this meal so special and important to you? Or if that's not coming to mind readily, but you have in mind your favorite meal, like your go-to, like when it's your birthday and your mom says she's going to cook for you, what is your request? Go ahead and maybe while you're listening, sketch that out on your paper or your paper plate and keep it in mind because we'll ask you to share a little bit about it later. I'm going to share an example here of our dear friend Jenna and her beautiful, memorable meal. This is memorable to Jenna because she caught this fish. She caught the fish and then ate it with coleslaw and salsa. Definitely a memorable plate. And she was with special people or person when she had that meal. So that's Jenna's plate. And you see how simple it was. Let me borrow this one more time. You can tell this is a fish. You could tell this is coleslaw. Maybe if you couldn't initially, there's a label here that tells you exactly what it is. So please feel free to just sketch and label if it will help later. And while you're doing that, we're going to talk just a little bit about food, and I'll model like how you might talk to your students about food, the food that they eat when you're planning your school garden. So at the end of this project, you and your students will have installed a school garden that includes plants that have some cultural significance to your students. And everyone has had a hand at this point in planting the garden and sharing little pieces of their home culture with their students. So at times I'm going to talk to you like your students. At times I'll talk to you as an instructor to another instructor, giving tips on what you might do. And as we know, food is something that we all share. We all need it. We all enjoy it. But what we eat is heavily dependent on what's available to us and what we have access to. So where we live, what's growing around us, what's living around us really determines what it is that we eat. It's important when we're talking with students about food to really introduce food as a part of your culture, right? And understanding that everyone's culture is different because of where they grew up and where their families are from. And likewise, their food is going to reflect that. And yes, Jenna should be very proud of the fish that she caught. And I also cannot wait to hear about your special meals. So for example, if you were from Ethiopia and not Atlanta, and your plate may, just may, look a little something like this. So what's familiar to you may be stewed vegetable dishes. It may be bread. You may not use a lot of utensils when you're eating your food, and that's super okay. But imagine then coming to this classroom where we're eating out of plastic forks and sporks, and no one can relate to what's in your lunchbox, right? We're in a position to try to alleviate some of that. And likewise, if you were from Japan, You may have a bento box. Not sure that you'll have a bento box, but chances are that you will probably, you may have soups or noodles as a big part of your family's menu. Again, a little bit different from your classmates, but we're gonna talk about some ways that you can normalize some of that for all of your students. So if you didn't bring a pencil and paper and you're not drawing your special meal, go ahead and drop it in the chat. What's your favorite dish? Or what is this special meal for you? The activity, when we're talking about establishing your garden, this is something you can do with students K through 5. Obviously, the activities and the lessons that I'm going to talk about today should be adapted to your students' abilities, right? So we're not going to have kindergartners researching growing zones and creating charts, right? So please feel free to adapt. We're going to send out some information later so that you can see the activities and tweak it to meet your students' needs. But one way you might consider talking about culture and food and a culturally reflective garden is with a story. This is a book that I might consider starting with. It's called The Ugly Vegetables by Graceland. It's a beautiful story. I'll just share with you. We're not going to read it today for time's sake. But from the beginning to the end of the story, this young child grows a garden with her mom, and she notices that in their garden, the food is ugly. It's weird in comparison to what else is growing in the neighborhood. There are beautiful flowers, beautiful plants. She wants beautiful flowers in the garden. At the end of the story, she understands that these ugly vegetables created beautiful dishes that were very special to her family, and not only her family, but the community. And they were all able to contribute to a wonderful meal. Okay. You might consider opening the conversation with this book. The Ugly Vegetables by Graceland, and we'll send that out later. I have notes here, y'all. I'm not even gonna pretend. When I look to the side, I'm coming right back. All right, so if you, after reading that story, then you might ask your students to create a food journal. And a food journal would be something simple. We could share a template in the packet that we send out afterwards, but just a way for students to catalog what it is that they're eating over the course of a week, maybe 5 days. If 5 days is a stretch, let's go ahead and pull it back to 3, maybe the weekend. Or just ask them, you could do it as simple as the question that we asked at the beginning of this conversation. What's your favorite meal? What's your birthday meal? What is a meal that you wish your grown-ups would prepare every day? And that can be what they bring back. Now, thumbs up if you still need a little bit more time for your sketch of your favorite meal. No? Oh, we've got 2 pages. All right, we're gonna pause right here and go into breakout rooms. In your breakout rooms, I have a prompt for you. If you drew a picture of your meal, please be prepared to share it, just like I did with Jenna's, in the camera with your partner. If you didn't have a drawing, totally fine. Tell them about it. The questions that we'd like for you to ask your partners, and I will drop them in a chat here, is what is your favorite dish? Why is it your favorite dish? And what or how do you feel when you eat it? Questions are in the chat. Kimberly is going to send us off into breakout rooms for about 5 minutes. So you may take 2.5 minutes each. I think everyone, let's see if everyone's back. I think everybody's back. All right. So I hope you saw the note in the breakout rooms. We'd love to have a couple of folks come off mute and share what your partner shared. And remember, we asked them, what's your favorite dish? Why is it your favorite? And how do you feel when you eat it? So we can do this one of 2 ways. You can just go for it and take yourself off mute, grab the mic, or if we want to use reactions and you raise a hand, I can call on folks.
All right, Tasha, this is Ann. I'm go ahead. Hey. Well, my partner shared that one of her meals was the one that her mom always prepared, which was broccoli, mashed potatoes, and meatloaf. And she said she just reminds her of her mom, and that's her favorite meal.
Sweet. And who is your partner?
Jana.
Jana. Do you have a picture, Jana? I see it.
You see it?
Yep, I see it. Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome.
Jana, for sharing. Anybody else? Let's see if we can get at least 2 more friends to share their friends' favorite foods and the feels that go with it.
I'll share. So I think Amanda was my partner. And her favorite dish is green bean casserole, like the really traditional green bean casserole. Like I like to call it 1980s church basement food kind of thing when you go to a funeral that they have, or a wedding or whatever at your religious or place. So she said she feels sometimes a little guilty because it is like some canned items, but if you've ever tried to make that with fresh things, it does not have the same, it's not the same dish. So staying true to that. And she said also that's part of like a Thanksgiving meal that her family participated in, and then a cookie that she made with her grandma. And so she has really great memories of that as well. So that traditional meal, and also just the consistent traditional experience of, food and family and celebration.
Thanks, Jessie. And Amanda, you said was your partner? Hi, Amanda. Do you have a
Hi.
picture?
Yeah, I do. It's pretty rudimentary. This is my green bean casserole. And those are my cookies. They're like moon shaped. So
Perfect. Thank you for naming that. There's only one way to make the casserole, and it's going to require a can opener. It's true. Thanks, Jessie and Amanda. Anyone else want to come off mute to share? One more, maybe.
My partner was Kimberly, and hey, Tasha. And Kimberly said that although she's not Mexican, she loved Mexican food. She said she just loved eating it. And so she just said she just always loved Mexican food. And she has a picture. Kimberly has a picture that she drew. Although she said she's not a good artist. She's in there somewhere.
There's me, Hannah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. There's the picture. Just of tacos. I love tacos. I am not Mexican. I'm Lakota and I live in South Dakota. But just with the tomatoes, lettuce, cheese, jalapenos, salsa, side of beans and rice. So anytime we have a special event, then it's always Mexican food for me. Although it's not part of our traditional food, but still good.
You know what? It's a part of your home culture, right? If it's something that you're bringing to the table and celebrating with folks. Tacos was a big one in my house growing up too. That was my sister's request for birthdays, was tacos. So I love tacos. Anyone else? No.
I'll share really quick.
Cute.
Hi, Tasha.
Oh.
So my partner was Pamela, and I really liked hers because she mentioned that she's vegetarian, but her dish is something that she can make for her family that everyone enjoys, that is not like meat centric. So it's stuffed mushrooms with spinach, and she said sometimes she adds cheese. But yeah, it's just like a good component to a meal that she said that that everyone enjoys, no matter what their dietary preferences are, which I thought was cool.
Sweet. Thanks, Eve and Pamela. Folks, maybe, one of the questions was, how do you feel when you eat that special meal or your favorite meal? Maybe you can use a reaction to show, how do you feel when you eat your green bean casserole, or that cookie that follows the meal, or your tacos, or or your stuffed mushrooms. Celebratory, Kimberly says it's a celebratory feeling. I'm going to add how I feel. My mom makes certain dishes for me. It's just love. I feel love and I feel loved. Okay, not everybody react at once. Thank you for sharing. And as you can tell, like, imagine the excitement your students will have to be able to have some time specifically just talk about things that make them happy, and talk about some of their family traditions with someone who they may not normally share that information with. And to have it be valued and honored and elevated is really potent. All right, so now that we've got our list of favorite dishes, if I were teaching the class, as you were sharing, I may have a whiteboard. Many of you may have access to whiteboards as in lieu of chart paper, or a chart paper where I'm just kind of making a record, kind of writing down, not kind of, but literally writing down these favorite dishes, because now that we know what our favorite foods are, we can't plant tacos in the garden, right? We can't. I mean, this is a lesson for the youngest students to really come to that realization that before it was a taco, it was corn or wheat and beef or soy and dairy and lettuce, you know, whatever it is that you put into your food, in your tacos. So it's a great lesson to look at our favorite dishes and then start to break down, what food did we need? What plants or animals did we need to make those dishes? Personally, I would probably stick with the vegetables that went into that dish, depending on the age and previous conversations you're already having with your students. I have had some kids really break down in school when they found out that their hamburger used to be a cow, right? And that may or may not be something you feel comfortable talking to your students about. It is true. But I would probably stick with vegetables. Another book. How did that get in my lunchbox? This is one that you may use in conjunction with identifying the foods, or maybe especially for the younger students, before you start naming the vegetables that are in the dishes, share this book. This is a book, or maybe even just excerpts from the book. And it really just illustrates, they have a school lunch as an example here. And it illustrates how everything you see on this tray originated as plants. And that tomatoes are grown by a farmer before they get onto your plate. You know, that wheat was turned in, they needed to grow and harvest wheat to make the bread and the flour for the different snacks. Depending on the age of your students and previous discussions that you've already had, you should have an idea of where to start there. But you want to make sure that there's an understanding of, okay, a taco is really these vegetables that have been processed to become a taco, the perfect meal in front of me. So there's that first step. Any questions so far?
Tasha, what was the name of that book again? Okay.
How did that get in my lunchbox? The story of food. It's cute too. I mean, it's cute.
Yeah.
It's, the illustrations are really engaging, and it's, you know, the way that the graphics are. I like this book. Thank you, Kimberly. It's in the chat now. All right, so you see where we're heading now. We've identified our favorite meals. We know what is required to grow those favorite meals. And here we are with this list of vegetables. The next step is going to be to determine which of these vegetables can we actually grow. There's a good chance, unless you have a huge space and you're in the right climate, that wheat may not be an option for you to grow in your garden. It may be, but it may not be. And these are things to consider aloud with your students. What can we grow in our garden? Depending on the age of your students, you may have already talked about planting zones, climates, and seasonality. So now would be a time to reference those concepts and themes. You know what, we're in zone 7-8 right here. That means, and it's, you know, August, September, October. That means that what can we grow? What is on this list that we can grow here? Basically is what you're trying to answer with your students. For younger students, it may be more like, these are the things that we can grow here. You know, if you're working with kindergarten or first grade, it may be, as opposed to having them work through that question, you'll save yourself some time and pain, possibly by just explaining to them, these are the things that we can grow in this garden, and going from there. You can extend this, and so in a number of ways at this point, by pausing, having older students do the research to answer those questions. You can also extend this into thinking about how it is that you're going to plant. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna let Kimberly handle the chat. She's got it under wraps. Thank you, Kimberly. And Alita for those questions. But whichever route you decide to take to decide which vegetables you're going to plant in your garden, next thing is to plan your garden, right? To plan where you're gonna and how you're gonna plant those plants in your garden. So now it's the fun part. And you can also extend from here too with your older students, introduce square foot planting as a strategy for planting. Maybe ask your students, do a little bit of research. I'm all about giving kids technology and an opportunity to ask the questions and find the answers and come back, and then go back and re-ask those questions and re-look for the answers and come back until we arrive. And if you're in a STEM school, chances are your kids may have access to technology to do that. And if not, totally fine, you do. So you may introduce square foot gardening to your kids during this time, as I mentioned, or other growing strategies to plan a garden map. Maybe have your older students design a map. Either way, while they're working on figuring out where you're going to plant things, now is the time to collect what it is that you'll need. Seeds, starts. You may reach out to your students' families and ask, hey, heard you have a garden at home. You know, we'd like to grow the X, Y, or Z vegetable. Do you have seeds or starts from your garden? Imagine how special that would be for your student to not only name or be able to have some say in what goes into the garden, but to actually bring something from home to plant in that garden space. The connection and ownership there. Any questions about that, preparing to plant the garden? Y'all want to drop in the chat the tools that you know that we'll need to gather on the side as we're preparing to plant in the garden? I think they should be pretty universal with no matter the age group, unless you've got a big enough space that you need to haul out a tiller. And even then you may or may not should haul out a tiller. No? Okay, so you want a hand rake? Thank you, Alita. Yes, okay, I see it now. Watering cans, cups for watering. Yes, Jenna Mobley, we need water. We need water. You need water when you're planting your plants. A hand rake and hand shovels. Hand shovel. Also, if you're planting seeds especially, you may want to bring out some measuring tapes, just so that you can model for students. You know, plants need space to survive. That is one of the requirements for a plant to thrive. They need to be planted a certain distance apart. So these are just a few things you may keep in your arsenal. One of our favorite tools when I was in the classroom, and this was a treat, and it's also useful to have as a garden wand. You know, for students to water the garden, it's something that has to be taught, that we're really watering the soil and the roots and not the leaves of the plant. And having a tool like this that reaches into the beds will help your students get that water really close to the base of the plant, as opposed to, you know, just spraying the whole garden. But you use what you've got. If what you've got is cups and access to a spigot that pours water out of it, have those cups, whatever it is that you need based on what you've got. And as you start this project, it might also be a good time to reach out to families and other members of the school to ask if you don't have your materials yet, if you can get some donations. Yes. I like that. Bottles with potters to help hold water as needed. Yes. Sweet. Any thoughts, questions? We're almost there. All right, once your garden is planted, it's the waiting game where everybody's waiting for the vegetables to come up. So what are we doing while the garden is growing? Some suggestions that you'll see in the lesson plan that you'll receive later is consider collecting recipes and putting them into a class book. So you might do that by sending home a parent letter asking for them to submit a recipe. Now, in the spirit of being equitable and fair and knowing that not all of our students are going to have the same level of parental engagement or participation, be prepared to do that step with your students quietly. You know, so if I send Kimberly home with a letter that doesn't come back, Kimberly and I are going to take some time to look up, to find a recipe that, you know, will help us arrive at Kimberly's favorite dish so that Kimberly can still contribute to our family cookbook with her favorite meal. Once those recipes come back in, I would consider having students create artwork, an illustration, maybe a little bit more than the sketch that you did at the beginning of this. Maybe that sketch was the beginning, their first pass, but we want to publish this. We want to bind it. We want students' work to be professional as it's going to be for Miss Kugler's first grade class. We want it to be. So give them time, allow them time to edit and be happy and proud of the illustrations that we're matching with those recipes. And then bind them into a book. With that book, every student should have access to that book. With that book, you may consider selling the book to raise money to buy more hand tools or trowels. Trusty trowels. I could not remember the name of this a second ago, but
It's a hand shovel.
It's a hand shovel and a trowel. But maybe sell some cookbooks at a PTA meeting or something so that you can buy more materials for the garden. And now you're turning your students into like entrepreneurs and also published authors, right? And they're using that stuff to build their garden. Any questions or thought as I wrap this lesson? Thank you. Nathania, am I saying that correctly? Yes?
Yeah, Nathana.
Nathana.
Just Nathana. The I is silent.
Oh, okay. I love it. Nathana, thank you for sharing that. Yes, and I was taught when I first started growing to put the seeds in my mouth before planting them too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, as a way to like give the plant your genetic code so that it can
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's great to share those little cultural things with your classes as you're going along. There are so many opportunities also to invite parents into this project over the length of time, because what I just described is not a lesson, it's a collection of lessons and activities that are going to span a growing season. So think of ways that you can bring your parents in. If you want to extend this activity, you might consider, I already mentioned square foot gardening, use the recipe as an introduction, like look into other content areas. When we're talking about recipes, there are fractions involved, standard units of measurement. You could use that in your, keep referring back to this project in multiple content areas. Use some of the recipes to prepare dishes for taste testing. You might turn your plant makers into an art project. I didn't mention that, but you're going to need plant markers or plant labels in your garden, right? You could have those prepared. Once you know what it is that you're going to plant, you can also turn that into an art project where your students are making permanent garden markers. And allow each student to adopt a plant. I don't know if I would call this an extension. I think I would probably do this as a part of the project. At any rate, just have each student adopt a plant where they're cataloging that plant's growth and change over the lifespan from start to harvest. Any questions or thoughts? Thank you, Shay. Usually do a stretch circle at the beginning to limber up and ground our bodies and minds. Thank you, Shay. Any thoughts or questions? I think we're supposed to give 8 seconds as the good teacher rule. Y'all are teachers, is it 8? Wait time. So all right. thank you all for listening. Again, we're going to send some materials to follow up in some other lessons and activities that you might consider an overview of the project that we talked about today. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thanks for your time.
All right, y'all. Kimberly Kugler, if you don't mind sharing your screen, we're going to take a closer look at some of these culturally responsive standards. That's where you can buy the book. Great. Thank you so much, Kimberly. All right, y'all. So we talked earlier about how culturally responsive teaching is teaching that promotes identity and celebrates diversity in daily practices, not just for special occasions. So I want to dig a little deeper here. These are standards that come from Learning for Justice. And there are actually two other domains too. They have identity, diversity, justice, and action for the domains. And this is some language you can use to push your culturally responsive teaching a little bit further. So let's pull out just a couple here. And maybe in the chat, give me, yeah, I'm going to say a statement, and in the chat, put a 1 in the chat if you feel like this lesson supported this statement. Let's look at the identity statement number 1 first. The student-facing statement would be, I know and like who I am and can talk about my family and myself. If you feel like that was supported in this lesson, throw a 1 in the chat. I know and I like who I am and can talk about my family and myself. Yeah, this was a great lesson for practicing knowing who we are, what's special about us, and practicing talking about who we are and what's special about us. Let's look at number 5 under identity. I see that the way my family and I do things is both the same as and different from how other people do things, and I'm interested in both. Put a 1 in the chat if you feel like this lesson supported that statement. I see that the way my family and I do things is both the same and different from how other people do things, and I'm interested in both. Yeah, this is great. Particularly when Tasha was showing the different mealtime traditions from different countries, and when you were sharing with other people. All right, let's look at the diversity standards. I'm gonna pull out just a couple here. Let's look at number 6. I like being around people who are like me and different from me, and I can be friendly to everyone. Was this lesson an opportunity for us to get to know people and be respectful and friendly to people that are like and different from us? Great. And the last one, let's see. Let's go down to number 8 on the diversity standards. I want to know about other people and how our lives and experiences are the same and different. Was that supported by this lesson? I want to know about other people and how our lives and experiences are the same and different. Yeah, this is just a quick example of what it might sound like for students to take away broader, enduring understandings from a lesson like this, and broader, enduring understandings that lead them into a sense of identity and an appreciation of diversity. So this language for these 2 areas, identity, diversity, and for justice and action, if you want to go even further, and all of this, the student-facing language that matches, will come to you in an email after this presentation, so you can take a look and see how that might look in your classroom and how you can encourage those understandings within your students. All right, Kimberly, let's quickly look at this next slide. All right, and just a couple of standards integrations for this lesson. I just pulled a couple that I noticed happening in Tasha's lesson. One of our reading standards is to ask and answer questions like who, what, where, when, and why. And that was exactly what we did when we did these food swap, when we did these interview questions, is we asked and answered those questions. That's one of our Common Core reading standards in 2nd grade. Also in the very first activity with the paper plate, We have a writing standard that says use a combination of drawing, dictating, and writing to narrate a single event and provide a reaction to what happened. So notice you were writing about one event that was really special to you, one meal that was really special to you. And then Tasha later asked what your reaction was and what your feelings were about that. Those are some more of our Common Core standards. And the last one that I pulled out, one of our third grade standards, was to compare and contrast key details on the same topic. And that is exactly what we were doing when we were talking to each other and comparing to these meals from around the world, is that comparing and contrasting. There's a couple of other ideas up here on the screen of different ways that this could connect to standards in the classroom and hit not only the academic achievement, but also this cultural relevance. As a wrap up today, I'd love to hear in the chat, what could a lesson like this look like in your classroom? Depending on your location, on the age of your students, on where you are, what you're interested in, what's one takeaway? What's one thing you might try after being in this workshop with us today? You can jot those ideas down in the chat. And while you're sharing in the chat what this lesson might look like in your classroom or what you might take away from this, Kimberly Kugler is going to share with you an evaluation so you can help us learn and grow and be reflective ourselves. Thank you, Janelle and Beverly, for jumping in. I love reading these.
Yes, I am going to get the link to that evaluation in just a moment and put it in the chat. Let's see. Here it is. All right, everybody. I just put in the chat a link to our workshop evaluation. It is very short, super quick and easy. Most of them are multiple choice questions. If you could please complete that evaluation, we really do appreciate it. We use that data for grant reporting purposes and also to just make our workshops better. So thanks for giving us your honest feedback. I'm going to share my screen one more time. Oops. Let's see, here it is. And then Jenna, I didn't know if you wanted to give voice to anything before I move on.
I think that's it. We do truly appreciate your feedback on anything that you learned from the presentation today. I'm loving seeing these come into the chat. And just a reminder that we will also be sending you an email after this with resources to move forward with all of these ideas that you're writing into the chat. So we'll include all of those social justice standards. We'll also include a write-up of the lesson plan that you saw today. And if you need anything else, please reach out to us so we can help you move forward with all of these ideas that you've been writing into the chat.
Yes, thank you, Jenna. And as a reminder, we did record this session, so you can refer back to it later and watch it again later. We also have recordings of the last 3 webinars we did this month for Live in La Vida Okra, and they're all available on our Good Food for Thought events page. You can also find them on our YouTube channel. And if you're signed up for Live in La Vida Okra, you're getting a weekly email, a weekly newsletter from us, and we are putting them in those newsletters as well. So there's different ways you can access those. And then just a reminder, October is not over yet. Let's keep living La Vida Okra strong. This is a special year, y'all. 2021, Live in La Vida Okra. Okra is a very special vegetable, so let's live La Vida Okra to the fullest extent possible. And if you post any of your okra activities on social media and use the hashtag Live in La Vida Okra, you're entered for a chance to win a prize. So we have one more weekly prize to give away, and then we have a grand prize winner that we'll give a grand prize that we'll give away too at the end of the month. And that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much to our presenters, Jenna Mobley, Tasha Gomes, and Suzanne.